our consecrated men and women, our brothers in the presbyteral ministry, the whole people of God, greetings from the local church of Cebu. As you reach the golden milestone of AMRSP, I commend you for gathering your hearts and minds online. Remember, in the ancient past, when the church was persecuted and it cannot gather on the plain, level earth, it went underground. Now we gather collectively as church on the upper ground, which is cyberspace. And so, you are gathered online to celebrate the giftedness of your association and to stir the gift once more for the sake of renewal of mission. Your celebration falls within the beautiful context of the quincentennial jubilee of the arrival of Christianity in 1521. As you creatively link up in this convention in cyberspace, it is my hope that this can be a kind of a buffet of manna in the desert of our pandemic struggles and the gushing water from the rock, our church, to quench our thirst for meaningful renewal. At the outset, though, I wish to express humbly apologies for whatever lacking this presentation will offer. Your invitation, and I'm very happy about that, came in though as we were preparing for the Jubilee Triduum. Admittedly, this is done in haste. So because we just finished our work and now we are in the middle of preparing for the May 1 National Consecration. I tried to decline, but your organizers insisted, so listen at your own risk. No, but seriously, bring along some popcorn or a pot of coffee to keep you awake. Having said that, let this be my humble way of expressing congratulations and affirmation for the manifold blessings you have brought to the Philippine Church, whether walking on the streets, whether praying inside your chapels, whether working in the urban and the rural areas. Truly, your association is a source of tremendous blessing for our Philippine Church. So let's begin our reflection on collaboration in the Vineyard, the Consecrated, the Clergy, and the Laity. The curse of Cain. In the classic story of Cain being confronted by God for the death of Abel, Genesis 4:9, the haunting response of his reverberates through the ages. Am I my brother's keeper? Herein, we find two important things being denied: the identity of being related as a brother and the corresponding accountability to act from within that context. By this, he actually negated his relationship with Abel and ultimately to God. To keep is to protect and cherish. In short, be accountable. It was not the action only that was morally wrong. It was the preceding premise of the cancellation that I am better off without my brother. This led to the inner divide and the matrix of jealousy, hatred, and eventually murder followed. Do you notice that the context was worship? I didn't realize that worship can be very dangerous, don't you think? However, pushed in its ramifications, it is within the ministry of worship, within the church activity, in a manner of speaking, that murder and annihilation of life occurred. The competition in who can give the better offering, it does not seem to be far away from our context. Today, sadly, this propensity continues. Yet what is killed is the sense of brotherhood. To each his own, never mind others. Leave me alone. Mind your own business. The sense of belonging to a human family is fading and considered even as some kind of a utopia. Instead, there is global indifference based on the pervading mindset that I am better off without others. Am I my brother's keeper? Here is where we realize our reflection is to start from this kind of dilemma and crisis in our salvation history. Now, second point, finding a brother is finding half a soul. So, the curse of Cain of wandering continues. Of course, it is understood that he was driven by remorse, but I like one poet who described the curse to wander as actually an invitation for him to learn the hard lesson of who he is and who we are as a humanity. Who are we if not brothers or sisters to one another? That his salvation is intertwined with his brother. I believe that we are still, in a way, striving also to learn this hard lesson. Again, by extension of application, the curse or the challenge of wandering until we learn the hard lesson is also passed down to us, to all of us. Now, our identity then, if we hope to recover this, is an identity of relationship with God. And because God is Trinitarian relationship, can we really achieve our fullness of identity from outside this context? Cain was not only cutting his relationship with his brother, ultimately, he was cutting his relationship with our God. Only when he finds again this fundamental identity of relationship in communion that his soul will find redemption. Quoting St. Augustine, finding a brother is finding half our soul. This then must be our constant quest, not so much as a curse, but rather wherever we are, whatever work we do as the people of God, we find the soul of us, the half of our soul in one another. This is actually the grounding of collaboration. And so, the third point that I would like to emphasize now is the rediscovering of our true identity as the people of God. In all our hyperconnectivity, we still experience fragmentation. Anyone who thinks that the only lesson to be learned is to improve what we are already doing or refine existing systems and regulations is denying an important reality. Now, this is Pope Francis, this is not Dodong. If we plumb deeper this observation of his, he addresses us to understand the deeper roots of the problem. To address only systemic function, where processes like cooperation and collaboration are indeed important, but at the same time, we miss out the crisis of identity of who we are, then that is lacking. And so, very important, if we follow the movement of the discernment of the Holy Father, to go back again to his thoughts that can serve as much needed pointers and indicators in how to move forward, he said, "It is my desire that in our time, by acknowledging the dignity of one another, we contribute to the rebirth of fraternity. Brotherhood," wait for it, dear sisters, "between all men and women." I like this very much. Brotherhood between all men and women. Then he unveils a secret. If we turn our lives into a wonderful adventure, and that is what He is really joyfully inviting us to do, we must realize no one can face life in isolation. We need the community that supports and helps us. We look forward together. Alone, we see just illusions, a mirage. Dreams are turned, however, to reality when built together. Let us dream and journey then as brothers and sisters all, fratelli tutti. And so, this is basically, by this time, you would have understood that I am basing most of my thoughts and sharing right now on this papal exhortation and teaching, fratelli tutti. The moment we are grafted to Christ in baptism, we are grafted to one another. We are brothers and sisters, keepers of one another, therefore responsible for one another. From this core identity of communion, the appropriate movement of being flows out. And this is collaboration in mission. Viewed from the ecclesiology of communion, espoused by Vatican II, it is to be understood as a relationship that we are all fratelli tutti, brothers and sisters all, the whole people of God. Collaboration, then, is not an action to be done for the sake of social or corporate efficiency, but rather born out of theological exigency. It is simply acting from the core of who we are. The relationship, the identity of brotherhood, the identity of communion, that is where collaboration naturally overflows. Now, these are nice words, but we must be realistic in understanding that this kind of aspiration also will encounter challenges, bumps on the road, so to say. Now, the Pope uses a very interesting and timely imagery of the virus that can attack our aspirations for communion and collaboration. I recall last year I was already on the check-in area preparing to board. I was excited. It will be my first CBCP meeting. But no, they pointed out my red eyes and they asked me to see the doctor underneath the first level. And the doctor said, "Sorry, sir, I cannot allow you to fly." So I asked the doctor, "What medicine will I take for the sore eyes?" He said, "If it's bacteria, I can give you easily the antibiotics. But since it's a virus, you just have to rest and go through it and heal." Well, it did not really console me very much, but interestingly, that is what he prescribed. Brothers and sisters, all of those joining in this online convention, by the way, it was not the COVID, no, but it was an ordinary virus that hit the eyes. Indeed, there are minute things that can enter our biosystem and bring us down. Pope Francis uses this medical language of the pandemic context to highlight what are obstructions to build fraternal communion that can hamper effective collaboration. Number one, the virus of isolationism. Isolation and withdrawal intones one's own interest and are never the way to restore hope and bring about renewal. Rather, it is closedness and not closeness. So he added the letter D to the former. It is a culture of clash and moving away, not a culture of encounter. This is the Holy Father in Fratelli Tutti number 30. So, reflecting upon this, I'm always disturbed when some priests I would hear refused to receive a brother priest in the parish assignment. The excuses would range from, this can only support one financially, or I'm better off alone because it's difficult to deal with others. Of course, this has some valid points raised, but it is to our impoverishment if we cannot go beyond this isolationist tendency. One priest shared, as if justifying, but he was also sincere in seeking for clarification. How about, he said, if I am an eagle and am better off assigned alone rather than having constant conflicts with another priest? He was sincere, I can sense that, but what worried me is the kind of consciousness that as an eagle can fly, I can fly on my own castle on the sky and have nothing to do with you unless I want to feed. I am higher than others. There's a disconnect there in terms of those who share the same priesthood and mission. That is what really bothers me. So consecrated life or ordination to priesthood or even lay mission is actually a community collective action of mission. As I've said, the moment you are grafted to Christ, you are grafted to one another. In sickness or in health, for better, for worse, till death do us part. When one's own interest takes precedence, it is intoned or even enthroned, and not God's interest and the church's interest, then, conscious or not, the virus of isolationism is already creating damage within you. The worst scenario is that we cannot actually survive in ministry alone. Yes, even if you have immediate success, long term, it will not be sustained if you are doing it cowboy, Lone Ranger style, and you are just doing it in isolationist manner. Why? There will come a time that there will be some snags and bumps and difficulties. I mean, failures and frustrations can creep in. Then it brings along loneliness and despair. And when that happens, there is a gaping void within us, and that is an invitation for addictions to come in. Yes, virtual relationships, which are not real, but fleeting. And also even other forms of feeling that even illicit or unhealthy relationships. So that we try to fill in anything that we can grasp to fill in that void in order there will be no more lonely nights. So, my dear brothers and sisters, once in a while, soar like an eagle in ministry, but be willing to walk the dirty mud when mission calls for this. Openness, not closedness, is the key. One priest nearly died of drug overdose. He isolated himself from his batch. Worried, his classmates searched for him and found him and brought him to the hospital at the nick of time. The doctor said if he was brought in a minute late, he would have not survived. To live and thrive, we need to seek out one another and forge a partnership in mission. Number 2, the virus of individualism. If we revisit the myth of Narcissus, I'm sure most of us are familiar with Greek mythology. We recall how he fell in love with his own reflection. He must have been so handsome and beautiful that he pined away in adoration, looking at his own image till he died. The tragedy here is self-absorption in love. Modern day narcissism can afflict society, and yes, are you ready for this? Even among us inside the church. The Pope points out, our individual concerns are the only ones that matters. Fratelli Tutti 19. We then think in categories of them instead of us. This is the breeding ground for competition, anxiety. For example, your assignments are harvesting grounds for trophies of accomplishments. Best homilist, best construction, best organizer, best fundraiser, best ballroom dancer, o pwede mo nang ihalo ang lahat-lahat. Nowadays, best YouTube sensation or best viral religious or priest or lay. Please don't get me wrong. We need to do what must be done for the sake of mission. But the subtle attacks, if we are not aware, if individualism creeps in, there's no room for others, only me. I always like the acronym of ego, which I've read. Ego, if it's self-absorbed love, can stand for edging God out. God is not denied. God is just pushed to the edges. And here, the ego then becomes the next idol, the focus. So the spotlight is important because it is your validation. It becomes dangerous if you are just always toxically moving and craving for that. It actually then is mixed up with pride and arrogance. It is good to recall that for Dante in L'Inferno, the image of the devil is the one like Narcissus, looking down at his own image at the river of ice. This is what classical commentators would call self-absorbed love. What an interesting imagery of hell. And so, the proclivity for selfishness, the tendency to be concerned only with myself, my own petty interests, has been there since the dawn of time and has taken different forms down the ages. Pope Francis pointed out. By the way, the self-absorbed love also makes it difficult for us to listen to others. So it's just our interest, our voice, our plans. Collaboration is very difficult when there is a virus of individualism operating within our system. In Fratelli Tutti, he further added, radical individualism is hard to eliminate because it is clever and makes us believe that everything consists in giving free rein to our own ambitions. Like a stifling vine, it will eliminate obedience, charity, and communion. Now, what is the antidote? The antidote is to build a sense of fraternity, cultivated through education, dialogue, and values of mutual reciprocity and mutual enrichment. Fratelli Tutti 103. All right? One final virus, the virus of racism. Racism is a virus that mutates. It's kind of a chameleon. It can emerge in different forms. That's why others are talking about modified racism. Anyway, I recall I was in Milan airport when I was doing my studies, and I was in line. I don't know, it's for me, it's important to follow the line and just to follow the flow out of justice. Then suddenly a mother and a son, Italians, they inserted themselves in front of me and even kind of brushing me to the side. I am open, by the way, for the elders to go ahead, but that was done rudely, without even a respectful nod or a signal. May we go ahead? For me, that was very, very disturbing. Since my bag was actually, timing man, was already placed on the scanner and it started moving to the other side, I stepped to the side and proceeded ahead of them. Now the mother and son, then behind me, spoke in Italian, something like, "Oh, look at this Chinese. They are everywhere and they are rude." So, and of course they were referring to me. And I was reacting and I was affected because I'm the one who is being considered rude here. So at the other side of the scanner, even though my bag came out first, I waited patiently, I gave some space, and then when they crossed, I let them go ahead and I pointed to their bags, "Prego." Prego is a formal, courteous expression, means go ahead, you may go ahead. And then, wow, they looked at me with bulging eyes, surprised. They realized I understood that they were backstabbing me. Well, they were mentioning a lot of harsh comments addressed to my person. Now here is a minor incident, but it reveals a kind of racism. And I realized that it is really all around us. And we are not exempted from this virus. Even the hate crimes that in America, it disturbs us, no? But for me, the most painful racism is religious racism. Yes, I call this modified racism or religious racism. For example, kanang superior saying, "Brother ka lang, dili ka ordained." Or someone would say, "Diocesan priest ka lang, hindi ka religious." Or the religious would comment, "Sister, madre ka lang." And then the madre, out of frustration, would lash out at the lay staff saying, "Hoy, laiko ka lang." So you see how the vicious cycle works in layers? This is called a modified sense of racism, revealing hierarchology according to Yves Congar. We need hierarchy, but side by side with synodality, an important theme that is being developed and promoted by the Holy Father. This deserves a new kind of treatment and exposition perhaps in the future. But here, we do not want to be trapped by exclusivism as a group or as a race. Even within the church, it's still happening. My confradia is better than yours. We are closer to Father than your group, etc., etc. One must not forget also, when we talk about the nation in general, that being a foreigner may not be limited to geographical categories alone. There can be persons living within the same country, yet abandoned or ignored by society in which they live. These persons can be considered existential foreigner. I thought this is very powerful, existential foreigner. He also mentioned hidden exiles or hidden foreigners, the disabled, the elderly, the wounded couples, LGBTQ. To them can be included our internal and external migrants who move due to poverty and are treated poorly. Here, racism takes the form of exclusivism. He even used an interesting term, mafia pedagogy. In the Vatican news, we also hear of the lavender mafia, or the mafia around the bishop, or the mafia of sisters, to be fair in our examples. So to this mental and cultural and even religious exclusivism, the antidote is a culture of love that transcends borders. Fratelli Tutti 99. Openness of the heart to all without borders. Fratelli Tutti number 3. And becoming a good Samaritan who is a neighbor without borders. Now, for the conclusion, Did you finish your popcorn and your coffee already? So, brothers and sisters, the more we fail to pursue the re-establishment, the refounding of our identity as relationship in communion, the virus of isolationism will attack us. The antidote is to seek genuine life-giving encounters. The more we pursue thoughts that I'm the only one who matters here, the virus of individualism will push us to be trapped in the sweet seduction of pride. God and neighbor are not denied, but pushed to the sides. In place of them, ako, ego, myself, is enthroned. When it's them versus my group, then the racism or exclusivism becomes a binary trap within our mental viewpoints of how to look at the world and to engage the world. Only when we discover a culture and a love without borders, when we discover solidarity to see that the other half of my soul is within my brother or sister, then we are fratelli tutti, brothers and sisters all, ready for another 500 years or more of collaboration in mission. With my heartfelt appreciation and congratulation, I pray that this, your anniversary, the golden anniversary, which falls within the context of the quincentennial jubilee, be a moment of grace, of renewal, for the sake of deeper collaboration in mission based on the identity and relationship of communion. To each and everyone, God bless you all.